Caleb Frost. Whitaker had ridden through enough winters to know when the mountains meant to kill. A man! And on that Christmas Eve of 1884, the San Juans were speaking in a voice of ice. Snow wasn't falling. It was cutting sideways, stinging his face like thrown gravel. The wind swallowed the sound of his horse's hooves, turning every breath into a burning drag of frozen air. He'd tracked the Apache raiders for 18 miles through the drifts, following a trail that shouldn't have existed in weather like this. Either they were desperate, or someone had driven them into these passes. Caleb suspected the latter. When the broken silhouette of the trapper's shack took shape through the storm, he felt a prickle crawl up his spine. The place looked like it had been abandoned years ago, yet a thin ribbon of smoke curled from the chimney. His instincts, honed in a decade of outlaw days and 5 years of wearing a marshal's badge, whispered that something was wrong. He pushed through the hanging door and found the world waiting in frozen silence. The body of the girl froze him harder than the storm. 15, maybe 16. Her hair was crusted with frost, her eyes still open, as if she'd died staring at something just outside the doorway. The knife in her hand had cooled in her grip. Her breath was long gone. A crime scene without a culprit. A tragedy without any footprints of the ones who caused it. Then the twins cried. The sound was small, but in that shack it was a thunderclap, a plea, a warning. Caleb turned to the cradle and his chest tightened. 2 tiny faces, red with cold and fear, squirmed in a blanket soaked with their mother's blood. One reached toward him with a trembling hand, as if begging even a stranger with a gun for salvation. Pinned to the blanket was the note. 7 words, written with a shaking hand. He's coming back for them. Caleb's jaw clenched. Only one man would leave a message like that. Only one man who knew how to strike where. Caleb had no defenses. Jonah Vale, once a brother to him, once a partner in more crimes than either dared to speak aloud. Until Jonah crossed lines, Caleb wouldn't. That was 10 years ago in Abilene. But time hadn't dulled Jonah's hate. If Jonah wanted these babies, it wasn't for anything good. And if he meant to return, the storm itself wouldn't slow him. Caleb lifted the twins, feeling their warmth through his gloves. A warmth so fragile it felt like it might slip away with the next gust of wind. His horse snorted nervously outside, sensing something stalking the dark. Wolves, but not just wolves. Jonah's gang traveled silent, never lighting fires, never leaving more tracks than necessary. In a blizzard like this, they'd be invisible until they were close enough to strike. Caleb wrapped the babies inside his coat, close to his chest, and stepped into the night. Snow hammered him immediately, blinding, suffocating. The cold was a living thing, clawing at him, trying to pull the strength from his legs. His horse fought the wind, each step labored. 40 miles to the nearest outpost, 6 hours until dawn. He'd ridden worse ground, but never carrying 2 lives so small they weighed nothing and yet everything. Behind him, faint through the blizzard, a horn sounded. Jonah's signal. Caleb didn't look back. Looking back never saved anyone. The wolves came first. Yellow eyes flickering through the storm, shapes weaving in and out like ghosts. Caleb fired twice, the muzzle flashes shredded instantly by the wind, but it kept them back. The babies stirred at the gunshots, soft cries muffled against his chest. He whispered to them, nonsense words, steady words, things no one would have ever expected Caleb Whitaker to say. 2 hours passed. The cold chewed through his coat. His fingers went numb. The horse stumbled more often than it walked clean. Caleb kept moving, because stopping meant dying, and dying meant leaving 2 innocents to a man with no soul left to lose. Near midnight, the blizzard broke just long enough for Caleb to see the ridge ahead, the halfway point, and on top of it, silhouetted against the faint moonlight, was a rider. Jonah. Motionless, waiting, as if he'd known exactly where Caleb would pass. Caleb didn't draw, not yet. The babies shifted. Jonah raised a hand in greeting, a gesture they'd once used as boys before the world turned them into men who couldn't share the same soil. Then Jonah vanished over the ridge. The meaning was clear. He wasn't chasing, he was herding, driving Caleb somewhere. Toward what, Caleb didn't know, but he'd face it when he had to. Dawn found him half frozen, his horse collapsing beneath him just as the lights of the mining outpost flickered through the trees. Men rushed out when they saw him, rough miners, armed, wary, until they saw what he carried. The twins were silent now, but alive. Barely. Caleb handed them over, with hands that shook from more than cold. He sank to his knees, not from weakness, but from the weight of everything he'd outrun. Wolves, storm, Jonah, the past. Some legends chose their heroes. Some heroes chose their burdens, but in the San Juan Mountains that Christmas Eve, it was a pair of newborns that decided Caleb Whitaker wouldn't die a killer. He'd live carrying something far heavier and far more promising than any gun he ever drew.